Now, as I've talked about many times before, but some of the best episodes of The Bad Batch over these 3 seasons, or 2+ seasons, have been the two-part episodes, or the mini-story arc episodes, you could call them, that are very reminiscent of the multi-episode story arcs the Clone Wars gave us back in the day, especially the later seasons of that show when it became exclusively mini-story arcs, usually 4-parters, after the first few seasons had several of the more one-off style episodes that weren't always the greatest or were hit and miss. Anyway, these two-part episodes tend to be better for the simple fact that there's just more time for the story to slow down and breathe a bit. Not everything feels so formulaic and rushed, where you get a beginning or setup, then a middle or complications, and then an end or overcoming those complications and getting away, and sometimes a bit too quickly or easily, and all of that being crammed into about a 22-minute runtime. And so it was rather nice to get a two-parter here, and to let this story have a bit of that breathing room instead of trying to do all of this in one episode, and maybe missing some of the subtle, smaller things that made these two more very good, enjoyable episodes, and kept the show on the hot streak that it's been on all season, and even going back into last season. So anyway then, it begins with Rex escorting Senator Singh and GS8 to a secret meeting, and you may remember them from the 10th episode of that first season, which maybe a little ironically was an episode that I criticized back then for not being 2 parts, and instead taking a great idea or concept, that being the Bad Batch having to rescue a former Separatist senator from the Imperials, and from the planet Raxus, which was the center of the Separatist government, and just jamming it all into one episode that very, very much felt rushed and felt like they were leaving a lot on the table. And instead of digging in and really exploring how they, the Bad Batch, felt about this mission after obviously fighting against the Separatists during the war, and then maybe having to sort of reflect on what they did or what the war itself had accomplished or why they fought against the Separatists in the first place, beyond just following orders, or even getting the other side of it and seeing how the Senator felt about having to be rescued by clones who had won the war for the Republic, you could argue. They were the ones who essentially put him in the position he's in now, where he has to flee after denouncing the Empire and being arrested in that episode. Anyway, instead of doing anything like that, the episode just kind of scratched the surface and felt like a bit of a disappointment. And so I'm glad to see that episode comes back to have some bearing or relevancy later on, or here in Season 3, as we now see Senator Singh, who's probably been in hiding or under clone protection this whole time. He's meeting up with Senator Chuchi, who was in a few episodes herself last season, coming out as basically an ally of the clones in the Senate, or wanting to see them treated well here in the post-war time period. Anyway, these two meet at an undisclosed location, and the two are discussing how they now both want the same thing, essentially, after being on opposite sides of each other in the war, that being freedom from the Empire, and they are trying to perhaps figure out a way to work together when their meeting is then interrupted by an assassin who looks a lot like, or exactly like, Clone X from those aforementioned episodes with Chu-Chi last season. Though last we saw him, Clone X, he was taking his own life. But, as we'll learn in this episode, there's a program, run of course by Hemlock, responsible for making a whole bunch of these clone assassins, you can call them, even wiping their numbers, and I'd assume wiping their memories as well, which is far worse than just being discarded and or being treated like fodder, because now they, the clones in this program, they don't even get their own number to identify themselves, much less a name, and any semblance of who they once were before the process seems to be lost to them and anyone who might want to help them. And I somehow both love and hate how cruel the Empire continues to be towards the clones after the war. And I'm going to guess here that becoming a Clone X is probably the result of a reprogramming of their chips, or dialing it up to an 11, essentially. And we did see them try to do that to Crosshair, or to his chip, back in Season 1. And I'm further guessing that this is essentially the same process being done to them that was done to Crosshair, with Crosshair even saying that they tried it on him, but it didn't work. Either way, when it does work, like I said, it seems to completely wipe their identity and turn them into even more of a mindless soldier, or one even more loyal to the Empire. However, this particular Clone X fails his mission and is even captured by Rex and the boys, which includes Hauser, who we saw first back in Season 1, as well as some other somewhat familiar names that we've gotten to see and know a bit, like Nemec and Fireball, Though hopefully you don't get too attached to any of them because most aren't making it through these episodes. They then discover a data puck on Clone X and once back on Teth, which I'm sure a lot of you will remember from the Clone Wars movie and a few episodes, and is apparently where these clone rebels, let's call them clone rebels I suppose, it's where they have their secret base. But once back there, they interrogate Clone X and get nothing from him, though I do like how Rex, obviously understanding and being the good clone that he is, he tries to appeal to this Clone X's better nature, basically telling him that they understand or he understands what he's been through, and that he doesn't blame him for what he's done for the Empire, that he is still a brother. However, Hauser is much more for pushing him to get some information, especially when it comes to Tantus, where they know some of their brothers are locked up and being experimented on. Soon enough then, they decrypt this data puck and learn that Clone X was sent after Senator Singh, and that he was also sent after Omega. They then contact the Bad Batch to tell them this, or to have them come to their base to tell them this. And Hauser is, well, he's rather excited at the prospect of being able to talk to Crosshair, after Crosshair, was responsible for many of his men being killed on Ryloth. Meanwhile, or back with the Bad Batch, we see Omega sort of imitating Crosshair at one point, something we saw her do quite a bit back in the first season with the other members of the Bad Batch. Anyway, here she's kind of imitating how Crosshair, likes to have a toothpick in his mouth and to fidget with it essentially. And Hunter notices this and kind of gets a look on his face that I'm not really sure what it is supposed to say. I think he's just concerned about the both of them. And this all just makes me believe even more than ever that the two survivors of this show, or from the team, will be only Crosshair and Omega, and that they have plans for them down the road, meaning those making these shows, Dave Filoni and company, that they have plans for the two characters in a future show. I wouldn't even be all that surprised if whatever animated show comes next, and I have no doubt another will be after this, but whatever comes next may directly include these two characters. And to maybe back that guess up a bit, we again, in these two episodes, we see them continuing to grow closer and closer, meaning Crosshair and Omega. She is definitely bringing about a change in him, slowly but surely. But someone not too fond of Crosshair, as I kind of mentioned before, is Hauser, and shortly after they arrive, he even asks a question of Crosshair that I've seen some fans asking or wondering about, and that I myself have kind of been questioning or wondering about. Which is, how does Crosshair not know how to get back to Tantus or where it is? I mean, I don't think he should know just because he was there or imprisoned there for months like Hauser seems to suggest. But you'd really think when they were escaping from Tantus, meaning him and Omega in a stolen Imperial ship, they would have checked some coordinates or been able to, I don't know, triangulate them somehow if need be, before they then abandoned the crashed ship, unless somehow the ship blocked them from being able to know something like that. I guess that's possible. But it just seems strange neither one tried to find out where Tantus was when they were escaping, especially with how badly Omega wanted to rescue the clones they had left behind. And no, I'm not saying that I think there's even a remote chance that Crosshair will turn out to be a traitor or a spy or anything like that in the end. In fact, these two episodes were basically him proving to Hauser why he isn't a spy. That is one of the main things it accomplishes, along with continuing to show some of the clones beginning to question the Empire and their motives, and kind of reiterating how the clones will need to all come together or work together to hopefully overcome what the Empire is doing to them. Not that I think that storyline has the happiest endings in store for us. Either way, the first episode that ends about how you'd expect it to end after seeing a second Clone X dispatched to take care of the problem, that being with the first one getting shot and killed by the second one, before the first one, could ever talk while being interrogated, assuming he ever would talk. Pretty sure his program isn't going to allow that. Though before he is killed, he does manage to sow some division amongst the good clones, or to further turn Hauser against Crosshair. We then have those good guy clones trying to capture or take out the new Clone X after he strikes. But there's a big explosion, a thermal detonator overheats essentially, and that is how we are left off, or that's when more Imperials show up, or more specifically, that's when Clone Commander Wolf, leading a team to bring in Omega, shows up. And he is a really interesting choice to send after renegade clones if you have any doubts at all about Wolf's loyalty, which maybe the Empire doesn't, I don't know. Or maybe they do, and that's why they sent him to sort of test him. And he does, when first arriving on scene, he does say that these are not insurgents, that they are clones, and he sounds like he's not 100% on board with whatever is going on here, or he's at the very least curious about what exactly is going on here. And so you'd really think with a mission this sensitive, where getting Omega back from other clones is so important to Hemlock, that sending clones to deal with other clones might not be your best choice, especially if they start talking to each other about what's really going on, which they of course do in the end. And all of this is again bringing up some questions about how exactly do the inhibitor chips work, or how did they work? We certainly got the impression that after Order 66, they were sort of, or the clones were sort of reset in a way. Not that they'd forgotten absolutely everything, but the, shall we say, independence they started to develop under the Jedi seemed to be reset to factory settings in a way. So are they sort of overcoming that reset, or what? I mean, I do think that's basically the answer, or maybe it worked better on some clones than others, depending on their experiences in the war, especially when it comes to working with the Jedi, who again were the ones who sort of taught them that individuality. But anyway, before getting way too far into those questions right now, as well as ahead of myself, the next or second episode was a rather action-packed one that is mostly about our clones trying to escape from the other clones. They're trying to get to a ship that doesn't have hyperspace capability, but does have an ability to send out a message to Echo for an extraction, hence the episode being named Extraction. However, not only do they have Wolf and his crew still on their trail, but the new Clone X is still after them as well, and after Omega, and he is able to shoot down their ship right after it takes off, but not before they get the signal out to Echo. And while making their way to an extraction point, we get some good stuff between Crosshair and Omega, like I was talking about before. This is why I like these two-part episodes, for all the oftentimes missed character moments that you just don't have time for in a 22-minute episode. And here we see that Crosshair is absolutely growing more and more concerned overall for Omega's well-being, and it's Hauser who takes notice of this and questions him about it later, or asks him what's changed since Ryloth. You seem different now. Which is when, he basically tells Hauser, or tells us, what we already knew, that he, Crosshair, realized his loyalty to the Empire was a one-way street, and that they didn't care about him or any of the clones. This then seems to be the beginning of some trust between these two, which may just be important down the road or in a future episode. But anyway, Clone X catches up with them, and Crosshair takes it upon himself to deal with him, which Omega doesn't like, but Crosshair doesn't care. I really enjoyed this little exchange between them.
I'll draw his fire. Get to the rendezvous.
I don't like that idea.
Too bad.
This then leads to a kind of a sniper battle between the two, which eventually turns into a knife fight, and eventually ends with Clone X going over a waterfall. But fear not, that doesn't kill him. We see him pulling himself out of the water a little later, which really leads me to believe it could be a clone we know under that helmet. I'm hoping it's not Tech, but perhaps it could be Cody, who, yes, Crosshair has a bit of a history with now, or after last season, when Cody made himself a potentially good candidate to have his chip cranked up to 11, when he refused to follow a direct order from an Imperial officer that wanted him to shoot someone, though Crosshair would do it himself and seemed to sort of save Cody, or at least saved him for the moment. We then have this sort of final standoff where Wolf catches up to Rex and the others who are left, though many of the other clone rebels have died along the way. But it's here that Rex recognizes Wolf and says, what the hell are you doing, basically? And Wolf recognizes him, or that he's been chasing him this whole time, and that the reports of him being dead or dying in a crash were wrong. And Wolf is clearly quite torn about what he should do here, especially when he is being told by Rex, someone he should trust, right? He's being told all sorts of things about what the Empire is doing to their brothers. In the end, Wolf lets them go, not too surprising since in Rebels we will see Wolf and Rex and, Gregor as well together. Though, interestingly enough, Wolf kind of betrays the Ghost crew and reports them to the Empire in that show. He's afraid that if the Empire finds out they're helping Jedi, they'll come and wipe out his brothers. So it's not so much that he's being loyal to the Empire, as much as he's being kind of trying to be loyal to his brothers, but doing the wrong thing anyway. At the very end of the episode then, Rex and Hunter have a little talk about how important this fight is, and about how important Omega is, and finding out why she is so important to the Empire. Though they do have a clue now, Omega mentions earlier in these episodes that the experiments on Tantus involve M-count, which is something Rex has at least heard of. And so, to wrap this up, I have to say that this season continues to deliver solid episodes. These two maybe weren't the very best of the season or anything. You could argue there's even some kind of redundancy with Crosshair telling Hauser and us, the audience, why he is no longer loyal to the Empire when that has been shown to us quite beautifully, actually. But overall, yes, still two very, very enjoyable episodes, and I'm nothing but excited for the back half of this season. Something tells me it is really going to deliver, and we have a bittersweet ending in store for us. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of these two episodes, or how you're feeling about the season so far overall here at pretty much the midway point, actually. Whatever the case may be, leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.